Hi, I'm Leo. I'm from Plant Resources, and today I'm joined by Mark Punchap, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Employer Branding Australia. Hi, Mark. Good morning.
Hey, how are you going? Thanks for having me.
Good, good. So we're here to speak a little bit about local government and specifically about how the local government is perceived as an employer. So just to give you a bit of context, Mark, tell us a bit more about yourself and your background in the area.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a marketer of, 25 years, but I despair of a lot of marketing that I see. I've been in and around recruitment for much of my career, and I despair of a lot of the recruitment I see. And I've experienced and delivered a fair amount of leadership, and there's been plenty of warts and all there as well. So when you put those things together, culture shaping and leadership, recruitment, talent attraction, and marketing, really what you get is employer branding. And employer branding is an amazing route to achieving better talent results, both externally and bringing the right people in, but actually also keeping them engaged. But only if you ditch the idea that it's about PR and gloss and campaigns, and if you actually focus on how do we improve as a place to work with our people, and how do we then win as an organisation through our people. And when you start with that, you can really achieve amazing things with the workforce that you have.
Lovely. That's great. Thank you. So what is the perception of local government as an employer out there? What do you see?
Yeah, and I think this is fascinating that, we all know what the perception is. It's highly varied. I recently put out on LinkedIn, just sort of said, what when I say working in local government, what is it? What do you feel? What instantly comes to mind? And it was so split. And critically, the positive stuff came from people who've worked in local government and who've experienced it. So there's a whole lot of good. The passion, the connectedness to community, the resilience. It actually requires great tenacity and grit to work in local government because, first of all, it's deep purpose and it's deep impact and really meaningful impact on people's lives. But if you think you're going to walk down the high street and they're going to high five you and applaud, you're dreaming. It's a thankless job in so many situations. And if you actually look at public perception, there are so many stereotypes that persist. The classic one would be the idea of people putting their feet up for 10 years of semi-retirement before they actually go. The idea of people not working very hard and getting away with it. The idea of bureaucracy and red tape and everything's so slow. The idea of people saying that's not my job and not wanting to get involved and just making life harder. The idea of people who are not very talented ending up in that because that's sort of the graveyard for careers. There are so many stereotypes, and they're hugely damaging. And overall, they are also highly incorrect. There are absolutely, obviously examples. It's a lot harder to get fired from a local government organisation than a corporate organisation on average, and we know this. We know that there are some challenges there around. People who need to pull their weight more and so on. But that's the same in any organisation. Of course, it might be exacerbated. Of course, there's bureaucracy and red tape. This is a reality. But people never talk about all that good, about the deep connection, about the persistence, about the connectedness. And from a point of view of actually working in it, about the growth opportunities that you have. Yeah. So I think it's fascinating to me because there are two stories and only one of them really gets told.
Yeah. Well, let's unpack that a little bit, specifically maybe towards the negative one, because that sounded to be quite a lot of them. So how and why did these negative stereotypes evolve?
Well, I think there's something fascinating. I was talking to a room full of local government CEOs and executives about a month ago, and it was on stage when I suddenly remembered, or I should say, I suddenly stumbled on what I think the problem is. I think there's actually two things. The first one is if you start with the customers of local government, i.e. the community, mm-hmm. This is an organisation, a council is an organisation where your customers can't leave you. Mm-hmm. And so they can't vote with their feet. And they're stuck with you. It's like being stuck. You can't choose who your family is, right? And you can't choose who your council is. So what that drives, and bearing in mind as well that so much of everybody's daily life where they live is affected by the work of council, which, by the way, is amazing purpose and impact. So they become a lightning rod as councils for the frustrations and the challenges of the day-to-day. Their role by default, they can't please everybody. And so simply by achieving a result for one constituent of your community, you're probably going to upset somebody else. So there's always that challenge. It's always walking that fine line. And the reason I've started with customers in the community when we've been talking about talent is because that cascades down. So the client is super unhappy. This is an organization that is set up to serve the client. And who bears the brunt of a lot of the unhappiness? It's the person cutting the grass that the passerby walks past. It's the person on the phone when somebody calls council. Now, I want to be super clear. You said, let's talk about the negative for a moment. There is so much positivity. There are people in the community who are super grateful. Part of the challenge, though, is the community tends to find its gratitude, and it tends to remember and see the bigger picture of what council is trying to achieve when there is a real crisis, like the flooding that's going on as we record this webinar, like COVID. At those moments, the libraries, the services, the people out on the roads become heroes. But in the day-to-day, it falls away. So it's very easy. Council is an easy target, and their workers are an even easier target. That in terms of the frustrations from the community, it's that. But the other thing I want to talk about, and I'm about to write a blog post about this, but the other thing I want to talk about is it's extremely hard to lead an organization if you're not on solid ground. And I think any CEO from a council or local government will really punch the air at this moment or just nod sagely through their tears, because you have the elected members, the councillors are your bosses, and there's a number of them. It might be 10, 11 people. And to get anything done, you've got to get a majority of them to say yes. And the people who said no will probably be frustrated when they didn't get their way. It's a board in a sense, but not really. They're not. It's a strange arrangement, and it's wonderful and it's needed, and I respect it. But I think, how can you lead consistently when you have maybe 10 bosses, 11 bosses, and really your real boss might be 10,000 or 1,000 community members. They're the clients, right? So I think that the top leader in the organisation is always compromised and has to walk a very fine line and try and be all things to all people. And then that cascades down. And so I've spoken to a lot of managers over the years in councils who say, I've got an employee who is underperforming. I can't get rid of them. I don't dare get rid of them. I don't dare even discipline them, because my boss above me probably won't back me. And in a local council or in a community council or regional council, it might be, well, they're friends and there's links there. It might be, if I discipline this person, even if it's all super professional and run with integrity, if I discipline this person and put them on performance management, I've got 2 years of process just to push this through. It's just too hard. And so then you get people, I think a lot of people join councils and get blunted and get tired, and then they'll sort of, there's a temptation to fall into going through the motions, and you get others who just quit because they can't stand it. Now, again, I'm being super extreme here. I'm not saying it's always like this, and there is so much good, but I think that it's really obvious how these perceptions arise.
Yeah, and just the other day, I actually saw an article that says that, was it 1 in 4 councils, or at least 80% of local councils are struggling to recruit? And I know, and I think I can say for everyone, the overall job market is tight. But for a sector that's got a lot of people saying, I want to do good for the community, to see that reflected in, okay, you want to do good for the community, but nobody's applying for our jobs. Do you think these stereotypes have a bit of play with it? Have any?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's 2 things going on at the same time, and it's a perfect storm. One is, 3 things. You've got a hard market, but even without a hard market, it's not about attracting some talent. It's about attracting the right talent. Mm-hmm. And you've got 2 things going on there. One is people's perception. So many of the people that councils really would love to engage, when they see the word council, they simply will not click. They will not spend that time, and you've got to work hard to stop them in their tracks, to stop them with something that says, oh, that's different. And I'll tell you an example of it in a moment. But at the same time, so you've got this perception, this big stereotype and perceptions to overcome with some of the target talent you want. And by the way, a lot of the talent you do attract, the challenge there is, it's not that they're the wrong people, but a lot of them are joining for the wrong reasons. So for years, councils have sold hard on the flexibility and the security and the stability. So you shouldn't be surprised when you get people who stay with you just because of that.
Yep.
And that leads me to the other side of this, which is that councils are not telling their story. They're not doing anywhere near enough. Some are. I'll tell you about some of those in a moment, but some are. But the majority are not telling their story. They're not doing anywhere enough to actually strategically and in a sophisticated but authentic way to connect with the talent they need and inspire them about the opportunity that's there.
All right. So before we go there, tell us about, so what is it really like to work for a council?
Well, you know what? I can't tell you as well as others could because I haven't worked for one. What I can say is I've spoken to many, many, many people across local government in Australia for the last 5 years in particular. And I've spent a lot of time in those councils working with them and focusing entirely on observing and learning about their culture. And the answer is it depends. Like anywhere, it's what is the council? What is the location? What is the team? Who is the manager? Who are the people around you? But what I can tell you is that there are some common themes. And I'd love to be able to say it's all amazing. It's not, it's hard. It's a slog. It's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back sometimes. But underneath everything I've seen, there is connection to community. There is a desire for so many people to do the right thing and a desire and a yearning to feel proud of what they do.
Yep.
But then there's this feeling of I work for council, that's unpopular. The classic one is the barbecue conversation. I've met many council employees who say, when people ask me at a barbecue what I do, I lie. Because if I tell them I'm in the council, I'll get, oh, can you help me with this? Or, oh, bloody hell, you are, and I'll have a go. Now, what I'm looking to try and achieve, I'm working with, LGMA Queensland, for example, we've been talking about this quite a lot, is how do we take an industry approach to this and drive some pride? The moment where an employee feels empowered and inspired to say, you know what, I know it's not easy. I know that we can't, but we can't please everyone. But I work with 300 or 3,000 people who do their best every day. And yeah, there's a few that don't do the right thing sometimes. I suspect it's the same in your organisation, but overwhelmingly there's a good people. So if you want to have a go about council, maybe don't do it here. And just that level of advocacy. And then the other side is the internal culture. You find a lot of organisations where people will say, yeah, there are people here who don't do the right thing and they get away with it. So how can we work on leadership and enabling, in having the hard conversations, in leading people first, and how can we improve our ability to frankly performance manage people and help bring them back in or help them move on? And critically, how do we drive a culture where the employees themselves are active owners and custodians of a positive culture? And I always say this is one example. There's that employee who, whatever the CEO sends out by email or says or does that day, they'll say, oh, see what they did now. See, there they go again. Oh, this place. And every day, oh, this is such a rubbish job. I hate working here. Imagine if someone who sees them every day, who goes through every day. I mean, it's tiring to have that and it brings you down. Imagine if that person felt empowered, inspired to put a hand on their shoulder gently and say, you seem so unhappy. Why don't you leave? And that's real culture for me.
Yeah. Well, how do you think, in what ways can councils or local government communicate their stories and their, I suppose, a value proposition for prospective candidates better out there?
Yeah, what we've seen consistently with councils, look, and I want to be clear, every council is super different, right? If you talk about a big city council versus a local regional council, and even beyond that, there are so many differences. But I think the fundamental for all of them is engage your people, listen to them, and involve them. And that's their motherhood statements. It's super easy for someone like me to rock up to a webinar and say this stuff. But what I will say is I've seen this work consistently. What you must not do is build an EVP with an agency and have some nice words and some mood music on a video and put it out there. And what I always say is the test is this: when you put out your glossy video or your EVP messaging and your new careers site, if your people will roll their eyes and spit out their tea or nudge each other and grin or whatever, then you failed. You'll do more damage because what you're doing is you're distancing yourself from the people who actually deliver for the community every day and who are your brand. So the way to approach this is don't come into this saying, oh, how do we recruit better people? Say, how do we become an even better place to work? How do we drive a culture that delivers what we want to deliver for the community, that is proud, and that the people who feel safe and supported and part of something? And a key part of that narrative, by the way, is the community will never be consistently our greatest fans. They won't. We'll always be the lightning rod for the frustrations. That's and there's a really important line here that I've used with a council I worked with in the past that says, our job isn't easy. Important work never is. And we've got to get people galvanized around that idea. So I think listening to them, engaging with them, a great exercise can be to redo or re-energize your values. Now, you say to any council employee across Australia, let's talk about values, called company values or council values, and they'll probably roll their eyes, right? And I get it, makes sense. Same with many other organisations. If they're just words on a poster on a wall, it means nothing. But we've been very privileged to work with a number of councils and other organisations to uncover their values with their people, and it's about understanding not let's ownership, integrity, communication, customer first, and then let's vote on sticky notes or whiteboards. It's not how you do it. You ask people, what do you care about? What upsets you? What frustrates you? What do you hope people will say about you when you leave the room? What do you think matters most in what we do every day? When we fall short, what's happened? When we win and it feels great, what's going on? You unpack these deep personal experiences and standards and chosen behaviours, and then you bring that back and say, how does that come together in this collective of people that is a local government workforce? And how do we bring them to life? Then you craft them in a meaningful, different, unique way, but that your people say, yes, that is who we are. Yeah. When you put that out there and you do it in the right way, you'll be a long way towards, having the right foundation to do this. We've done some stuff, if you don't mind me sharing another example. We actually worked a while ago with Charters Towers Regional Council in Northern Queensland, and we did their values with them. And CTRC will be the first to say, like any council, we're not perfect and it's an ongoing journey. And again, by the way, in any local government council, especially in regions, you've got people who'll say in the same conversation, getting a job here is like winning the lottery, pays great, better than, unless you do FIFO, it's better than anywhere, the security, the stability, flexibility. But then in the same conversation, they'll say, it's toxic and I hate it, but I'm not leaving. So that's the real problem. So with CTRC, lots of great people trying to do great work, lots of day-to-day challenges like all councils. But we developed the values that the people wanted to strive for, and the leaders really backed it and got involved. And then we just run a very simple initiative, which many people have done, which is for the employees to nominate somebody that they felt was living one or more of those values, either in something they did or consistently. The first person that was nominated was a street cleaner called Peter. And he gets up every day and he, before the crack of dawn, and he sorts out all the streets and makes them look great, and then he goes away again. And he said to me when I first met him before he got nominated, the thing about our job is nobody really notices unless we do it badly. So if you don't clean the streets, people know you exist, but otherwise they just take it for granted. And so much of what local government is about is this. Andrew Chesterman at Redland City Council talks about this. He's the CEO. He talks about this all the time. People don't celebrate when they turn on their tap and clean water comes out, but there's a lot of work that goes into making sure that happens, right? Anyway, Peter had done all this stuff, and he told me a story, actually. He said, once I was cleaning the streets, and I just about finished, and some local residents wanted to take a photo of the streets, of the nice clean streets and buildings. And they said, can you just get out of the way so we can take the photo, please? And it was so sad, that it's such a classic example and illustration of what council workers often experience. Anyway, he got nominated for living one of their values. And we told his story. We wrote his story and we put it out on Facebook. Now, most local councils will this idea will resonate. You put out a social post, you'll get 2 comments and 2 likes. One like is from the person who posted it, the other one is from their sister. And the first comment says, you didn't pick up my bins again, what am I paying rates for? And the other one says, you're building a supermarket in my garden, or the nightclub license shouldn't be this late, right? So people are unhappy, and I get that. When we put out his story, it reached 50,000 people with no advertising money spent whatsoever. There was something like 110, 120 comments, 300 50 or something reactions. Every single comment was positive, every single one. And the majority either came from teammates or more often from the community. And those community members were saying, not just this is great to see a good worker being recognised, but actually, Peter, I see you every day. You always give a friendly smile and a wave. I want you to know that it matters. And oh, I'm so glad to see this. I never knew your name. So it's just a great example of when you tell that story. Now, I want to ask you, when Peter was reluctant to do this, obviously, because he doesn't like the limelight and so on. But when we shared this with Peter and showed him what happened, how did it make him feel? When he took it home to his grandkids and his kids, how did it make them feel? How did it make his teammates feel when they saw him being recognised and therefore themselves being recognised by default? Yeah. What about the people who aren't pulling their weight at council? It's a little bit more awkward for them that day. Good. And critically, other talent elsewhere looks at that and says, oh, wow, there's an organisation that celebrates its people. Yeah, sorry, a long answer, but I really wanted to tell you that story. Peter's a superstar, and he's still there and doing a great job.
That's great. There are definitely stories like that. Generally speaking, is very heartwarming, and I think it does come down to feeling valued, not just by your workplace, but also you're right, the community that you serve. And it sometimes, I think a lot of people can say the same thing, is that you are never really remembered by the good things that you do, but you're remembered by that one little error that you did. Mm. So that's, we just spoke about more of that organizational value, but out of hiring is my joy of choice, recruitment. And I think you and I can agree that there is certain perception, again, when it comes to how local government recruitment process goes. So what do you think they are, and what do you think councils can do in order to improve that image?
Yeah, I'm going to try and give you a summary up top, because we've all seen, I've got many words on this stuff and I'll go on and on forever. So I'll give you a summary and then we can delve in. But if we break it down, they can absolutely shape and harness their employer brand, and they need to affect that. So the EVP, employee value proposition, really building out strategic and planned content that sends the right messages to the right people through the right channels. Critically beyond that, really revisit the application process and the candidate experience. We talked earlier on about this challenge of you've got the perceptions and negative stereotypes. Many councils' recruitment processes absolutely reinforce and confirm the negative stereotype. Selection criteria that are 20 pages long. I've met government employees, local government as well as other state and federal, that say, you know what, I would not be able to apply for my own job. The selection criteria is so ridiculous, and so we've got to rethink all of those things. But it's not just that. It's how do we break the mold? What the documentation in a council's recruitment process says, it's not reflective of the people in that council. They're real people. They're down to earth. They're passionate. And yet you walk into this process and it's like it's the 1950s. So big, long, you must send this and you must send this. In your job ads, using the passive voice. Now, this is the same for everyone, but councils are real sinners in this regard. They say things like, only successful applicants shall be contacted. First of all, you should be replying to every candidate. And if you can't resource that, you shouldn't be recruiting, because it's respectful, it's the right thing to do, and it's smart. But same thing, using words like shall and, the eligibility requirements include, rather than saying, here's what you'll need to bring, or here's what we're looking for. Mm-hmm. I always say to people, when was the last time you used the word commensurate? So why do people write remuneration shall be commensurate with experience? It's just so stupid, because you're reinforcing. So let's say we get a candidate who never wanted to work for council, and they sort of go, all right, I'll have a look. And then they start applying and they see all of that. They'll just drop off. So we've got to start speaking like the people who work for us. These are really wonderful people that I'd be happy to go to the pub with or have a coffee with. And yet it feels like an interrogation in the interview, and it feels like an endurance test just to send an application.
Moving on a little bit more, probing a little bit more on that. So that was the application process. What are your thoughts on the actual panel interview process? Because I've sat in one of those before.
Straight away, you said
no, it's like this very complicated, very fancy words application lodged, and then here you are sitting in the interview, and you've got 3 people in front of you with very specific questions. And yeah, tell me, what do you think about that?
And you know what? Again, councils are constrained and are compromised, because if they are not seen to have, and it's the same with all government, if they're not seen to have a robust process that is consistent and so on, they will get into so much trouble. So this is why you have risk and compliance and legal, and I get it. It's all in the margins for me. So we've worked with a number of clients where we've been able to push through some great job ad messaging, some great interview questions, some great interview experiences, while still adhering to what needs to be adhered to. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it might be otherwise. But I think the fact that you called it a panel interview, you know, everybody that recruits, usually you have an interview with more than one person, so it's a panel, but why call it a panel interview? What about, and you know, certainly there's a real challenge here. Recruiters in local government increasingly do get this, they understand, but you'll often get hiring managers, many of whom are fantastic, but a lot of them will come in and they still have an old school mindset of recruitment, which is, right, I've got the job, let's test them and let's see if they're right. And everybody knows, if you want to attract great talent for the role, don't treat an interview like a test.
Yep.
No, treat it like a mutual exploration to say, is the fit right? Is this going to work for both of us? So we've got to re-educate anyone who's in interviews about what they're trying to do. I touched on EVP briefly, and I'd love, if you want to talk about that, we can talk about how you do an EVP and for local government and so on. But I think once you have a great EVP, it's using that in the interview process. So let's say, you know, we've done this. We did this with Latrobe City Council in Victoria, with Redland City Council, with others as well. And what we said is, you know, you've got these pillars where you've identified the EVP. Here's why our people say they choose to work for us. I want that on the table. I'd love that in the application process. Here's what we hope you'll experience with us. Tell us about which one of these you're most excited about, rather than why are you applying? Oh, because I've always wanted to work for council. Just doesn't mean anything. And then in the interview, it's let's discuss that. Let's unpack that even more. You know, and then critically, once they start, first day, the manager should be sitting them and saying, right, you've joined us. Here's what we need you to do. But also, here's what you were hoping to get out of this. You talked about really wanting to do, you know, Latrobe City Council does amazing learning and development. They're really, really strong at it. So use the EVP pillar to open up a planning session with your manager and the new employee about, okay, what does the next 18 months look like for you from a learning perspective? Yeah, so that they're more likely to go, oh, wow, I'm getting the experience I wanted. I'm getting what I want to do. I will stick around and I'll invest, and I'll put up with the challenges that are always going to be there in working for council. Right.
Well, look, I can really see that you're very passionate about this. So thank you so much for your time. And, you know, I do want to say I do recruit in local government. So one of my, I deal with town planners, but local councils are one of my key clients. So I do know that it is a vibrant and progressive sector to work for. So I guess I just want to use this last bit to just say, you know, for those who are wanting to learn more about you, Mark, or to get in contact, tell us how they can find you.
Absolutely. So you can link in with me. There's very few people with my surname, Puncher, Puncher. You can send us an email via our website, hello@employerbrandingaustralia.com. And you won't be sold to. And again, I'm not here to pitch my business. If you need help, we'd love to help you. The thing I want to say to you is there's lots and lots you can do here. You do a lot if you do this strategically and you invest, but there's a lot you can do in just covering the basics. Yes. And the one thing I advise anyone listening to this to do, please, the next 5 people you speak to who work in your council, ask them 3 questions. Number 1, what attracted you to join us in the first place? Number 2, what keeps you coming back even when it's hard? And number 3, if you left, what wouldn't you miss? And learn from what they're saying. Make it safe for them to tell you the truth. Probe and understand. When they say, oh, I stay for the people, well, everyone says that. Let's unpack that and understand it. But really start listening to your people. There is so much good in the local government sector. It is vibrant. It can be progressive. but we've just got to start learning to tell our story. So I'd love to help anybody who wants to get in touch, but otherwise just go away and ask those questions and start sharing the incredible stories of what your people are achieving every single day.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. That was really valuable. Thank you.
Thank you very much.